All right. So we're on page 1100. Just before we go into Yom Kippur, for the Torah Anytime people, in case anybody wants, this is the How to Run a Shabbos Table, which is available if you email me at Dovid B. Kaplan, B as in badminton, baseball, basketball, and it is available. I send you the file for $14. It is the How to Run a Shabbos Table to succeed with your family and children to make Shabbos table something enjoyable, interesting, and especially for disgruntled teenagers to get them to come to the Shabbos table too. In other words, it's the book of miracles. So what do you call it? So yesterday we were speaking about, we're on Hatzur Tamim Pa'olo, Kichol Drachav Mishpat, on page 1100. That Hashem's ways are righteous. I want to go into, elaborate on this a little bit. I want to tell you a couple more documented incidents, just to show you how we see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running the show. So there was an incident in England. Please don't eat during the shir. Please don't munch. It's not Kavod Torah. There was in England. There was a Rav. This is a Shaila that came up. There was a Rav in England. He was fundraising. Went to England to fundraise and so he gets into a cab on the way back to the airport in England. He's coming back there to Israel. So he gets into the cab, and the cab driver starts up a conversation with him, and he says, "You're a rabbi, right?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "I'm Jewish too." "Oh, that's great." The cab, he says, "I'm Jewish." He says, "Not only that, I have a daughter, and my daughter is married to a guy who learns in Kollel in Israel. She became a Balas Tshuva. She's married to a guy who learns in Kollel in Israel. I'm not religious, but my daughter's religious, and she has 3 kids. Wonderful, terrific." Then he kind of winks in the rearview mirror. He goes, "My wife actually had a Reformed conversion, but we never told my daughter because we never wanted to upset her." So I was looking like, well, if it's a Reformed conversion, which is no conversion at all, that means that the wife isn't Jewish. That means the daughter's not Jewish. That means the grandchildren aren't Jewish. That means nobody's Jewish. And then she's married to a guy learning in Kollel. So he says to her, whoa. He goes, where does your daughter live? She goes, in Bnei Brak. That's interesting. I'm from Bnei Brak also. Which Kollel does your son learn in? And he goes, base Torah. He goes, that's very interesting. Was his Kollel that he was fundraising for. So he came back to Israel, and he, they did all the necessary conversions and so on and so forth. Everybody lived happily ever after. Now, the point of the story is, if you've ever been to England, cabs, if you've ever been to cabs in Israel, I think there are basically 3 cabs, and it shows the same 3 cab drivers. And there's Boaz, there's Dudu, and there's Shimon. And they just switch hats every day. Those are the cab drivers. I know. I spend a good part of my life in cabs. I know a lot of cab drivers in Israel. In England, your chance of hitting a cab driver in England that knows somebody who you know in Israel, your chances are infinitesimal. Plus, that they should be somebody who's from your Kollel and it's his daughter. You see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's, the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the show. That's the what do you call it? That's the Hatzur Tamim Polo. You got to realize that people are being manipulated. People are being manipulated by God. There's another Shiloh, by the way. This is just also an interesting Shiloh, which did not have the same happy ending. Doesn't have any ending at all, actually. There was a woman who, she was like a war orphan during World War II, and she came to Israel. She got married. She was living in Mea Shearim, a frum woman. She became already a bubby. She was already a grandmother. And one day she decided she wants to go see her parents' graves. She'll never visit her parents' graves. So she goes off to Europe, and they're from a small town in Poland, and somebody gave her a map how to get there and the cemetery and everything else. When she gets to the small town, and she's never been there. There's a woman in her 60s, she's never been there. And she gets to Europe, and she gets to the small town, and she goes to the cemetery, and she sees every single grave has a cross on it. And she starts walking a couple of rows, and then she gets to her parents' graves, and they both have crosses on them. So she goes to the town, and there are 2 little old ladies in their 80s or 90s that are still alive for her. She says, do you remember the Wojciechowicz family? She says, "Oh yeah, wonderful family. Yeah, they sat 2 rows behind us in church, in the pews in church." And it turned out that the Rabbanim said that she's, what do you call it? She's, she's not Jewish. Right? The woman is not Jewish. As a mother, her husband's a Rav, and she's got children, sons who are Talmidei Chachamim, none of them are Jewish. So they came back, they assembled a special Beis Din. They assembled a special Beis Din, and they did a conversion without anybody knowing the names. Everybody was converted, and remember, in all these cases, it's a good thing nobody's a Kohen. Because if anybody's a Kohen and his wife is converted, so then they're not allowed to be married together. So all that part worked out well. But then the problem came up that the sons, one of the sons who was already a Rosh Kola or something, or a couple of the sons, had been signed on numerous ksubas as witnesses to Kedushin. They served as witnesses at marriages, right? Which is invalid because they're not Jewish, or they weren't Jewish before the thing. So the end of it was that, the Gedolei HaPoskim are dealing with this very tricky issue. Now, it's not the end of the world, because all you got to do is find those people and just have the husband say, Arat Mekudeshesli again, in front of two kosher witnesses. So an invalid marriage is not a good thing, but it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world. A much bigger problem would be had they been signed on a get, and a woman's divorced and then marries somebody else. That would be a much bigger problem. They didn't say it said that they had been signed on kedusha and served as witnesses at marriages. These are what do you call it? But so that was one. Now there's another incident that took place. There was a couple that was not religious, and when the oldest daughter became about 5-6 years old, they decided that based on what the school system in Israel looks like, the public school system in Israel, although better than the public school system in America, where they have metal detectors to make sure nobody bringing in weapons, the public schools in Israel are no party either. Right? There's a shortage of teachers. Nobody wants to go into teaching in Israel. They once did a survey that 33% of the kids in the Israeli public schools, the state schools, 33% of the kids carry plastic box cutters. Those plastic knives that they come out, they're plastic, they cut to cut boxes, like a razor to cut boxes. 33% of the kids carry plastic box, and of those 33%, 50% said they carry it in self-defense. If you go to Frum Cheder, the worst thing that happens is the kid benches too fast, then he's in trouble, because he benched too fast or he came late to school. Nobody's carrying boxes. So the parents decided that based on the circumstances, they're going to send their little daughter, to 6 years old, to a frum school because they figured that things would be better. Okay, so she comes home, she's 6 years old. She comes home the first day, Mommy, can we keep Shabbos? No, whatever her name is, Amara, whatever the girl's name is. No, we don't do that. Mommy, can we keep kosher? No, we don't do that. We're just sending you there for the education. Don't worry about the religious. Mommy, can we do this? No, cover your hair. No, we don't do that. Okay. So one Friday, she's looking for her daughter. Friday in the late afternoon, she's looking for her daughter. House is quiet. She's looking for her daughter, and she walks into her room, the daughter's room, and the daughter had lit 2 Shabbos candles, and they're right on the ledge, and she's just sitting on her bed staring at the Shabbos candles late Friday afternoon. And the mother walks in, and she takes one look at her daughter, and she says, Chana, what are you doing? The girl's caught red-handed. She said, Mommy, don't worry. One is for you and one is for Daddy. 2 Yortzeit candles that she had bought at the store. I forgot that part. I blew it. I forgot. She had gone down to the local store and she asked the storekeeper for 2 Shabbos candles. The guy knew the family and he knew they're not religious. He said, you don't mean Shabbos candles, you mean these. He gave her the 2 thick, fat Yortzeit candles, the memorial. So she's lit these 2 more Yortzeit candles. She's sitting there staring at it. And the mother walks in and catches her, and there she's staring at these Yortzeit candles. She said, what are you doing? She said, well, don't worry, Mommy, one is for you and one is for Daddy. The woman told this story, the mother told this story over at a convention for Balei Tshuvas to over 200 people, where she said, when I heard that from my daughter, I thought to myself that perhaps part of myself and my husband is truly dead. And we had a discussion. That means she speaks, he listens. Right? Wife talks, husband listens, and we decided, she decided that we are going to be frum. And they became frum. All because of what? Because, see, sometimes in life you don't even know a person has a merit. Maybe that why them and not somebody else? We don't know what the merits were. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides where the trigger point is. And the trigger point can be a very funny trigger point in life. You never know what the thing is that sets you off. That's Hatzur Tamim Polo. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's got all sorts of manipulations. He runs the world in very, very funny ways. So I mean, everybody has experienced it. You know, Yehuda, stand up for a second. While you're up, could you turn on the air conditioning thing? What do you call it? I tell you, I do it to my daughter all the time. We're sitting at the table. I say, stand up. She stands up. While you're up, can you get me to catch up? You know, she's caught on after all these years. She's finally caught on. Okay, that was what he called. That's that everybody has had in their life an experience where something like that has happened. There was a family in Basel, Switzerland. There was a Frum family in Basel, Switzerland. And a husband, wife, 13 kids. And I know this is true because I once told this in public and somebody from Switzerland said, yes, I know the family. So the family, father, mother, 13 kids, he's studying in Kollel. And one day they get a knock at the door. The wealthiest non-Jew in Basel has died. He has no heirs, nobody to inherit his property. He's left his entire multi-million-dollar estate to the family in Basel with the most children. Well, it's a Frum couple with 13 kids. But next in line was, 2.1 kids, a dog, and a bar of Swiss chocolate. That was it. That was it. The remarkable thing here is that imagine those parents going to sleep the night before, and how are we going to support them? How are we going to marry them off? How are we going to? And you see that there's a concept in life of HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the show. He doesn't always run it that way. I'm still waiting for that knock on the door or the letter from the lawyer. But he does. But at the end of the day, that's what the Torah is telling you. It works out. One way or another, it works out. That's Hatzur Talpa. Okay, let's go on. By the way, there's a medrash. This we're going to see on Yom Kippur. So, further, I got to tell you one other story. This a guy from Ohr Somayach told me. His grandfather was in a concentration camp. And one day he got a piece of metal, he was doing some work over there, got a piece of metal caught in his thumb. And he had to have it taken out. So the camp doctor came and he said to him, it's going to hurt and you better not scream, because if you scream, the Nazi guard they didn't let you scream. That was also part of the torture. So the doctor starts to pull out this piece of metal out of his hand, and at a certain point he couldn't help it, he gave a scream. So the Nazi guard comes in with his rifle and a bayonet. He bayoneted him in the thigh and then proceeded to drag him around the room with his bayonet. The thigh got very infected. It was in a terrible shape. There was a danger of the leg being amputated. In the meantime, they then went on what was called the Death March. Right? They had thousands of people died on the Death March. So his grandfather with an infected thigh was on the death march. And now if you stopped walking on the death march, they just shot you on the spot. And they were starving, they were hungry, they were cold. And if you stopped, they got shot on the spot. So the grandfather was walking on a bad thigh. And at a certain point, he couldn't walk anymore. And he just, not intentionally, he just collapsed and happened to fall into a pile of bushes. In the meantime, nobody noticed. And then the march continued. As a result of that, he survived the war. And his grandson told me the story. And he kept his leg, and his grandson told me, now, at the time that it's happening, you wonder, he's going through this pain, and he's got that pain, and he's getting dragged around the room by a bayonet. And it turns out that's the thing that causes you to survive, right? That's the manipulations, right? That's the manipulations. Now, we're going to see on Yom Kippur. I told you about the guy in Chicago. There was a guy in Chicago, a Jew from Germany, and he left Germany and he emigrated to Chicago, and he became what's it called, a glazier, a glazier. And what happened was, he was in World War I, and there was a group of Germans, so they'd capture a group of Italian soldiers, and the commandant said, just kill them, just take them out to the forest and shoot them. So this guy said to the commander, he said, we're not going to shoot them because, they're helpless. We're not going to shoot them. They're prisoners of war. He said, no, he started arguing, and he insisted that they don't shoot them. About 15 years later, eventually the war ended, and 15 years later he emigrated to Chicago. And he was working as a window maker, a glass maker, window maker. So one day he's driving, he's got a horse and wagon. You're talking in the late 20s, whatever it was, late 20s. And he sees there was a factory that was burnt out. Factory had a fire, was burnt out, and there was a pile of glass, all what's it called, suited up, with full of soot. But there's a pile of glass on the side. So he started loading up his wagon with this glass because he knew how to use this, recycle the glass to make windows out of it, whatever he's going to do. So he finishes loading up his wagon. He's all filthy, and he goes into the building, and he turns on a faucet to wash off. He got it out there. He turns on a faucet to wash off his hands, and instead of water, out comes beer. Chicago, my kind of town, right? You got beer comes out of the faucet. So he's like, what the heck is going on here? And all of a sudden he hears a voice. Somebody grabs him from the back and says, come with me, buddy. It turned out that was in the late 20s when they were bootlegging with alcohol during the time of Prohibition. And this was a headquarters for the mob in Chicago. That was why Al Capone made his money on bootleg whiskey. And this guy had stumbled into one of the mob headquarters over here. So they took him, they got a couple of guys grabbed him, a couple of Italians, and they said, okay, we're going to have to take him out. You can't have this guy going to the police. We're going to have to kill him. And one of them said, well, take him to the big boss first. So they take him upstairs to the big boss, and the big boss says, yeah, we're going to have to take him out to the forest and shoot him. But then he says to the guy, you look familiar from somewhere. What's your name? So he tells him his name. He says, where are you from? He says, I'm from Germany. He says, what did you do in Germany? He says, the whole background. And he tells him he was in the German army. He says, let me ask you a question. Did you ever capture a group of Italian soldiers? He says, yeah. And what happened? He says, well, I insisted we let him go. He says, right, I was one of those Italian soldiers. So we're not going to kill you. We're not going to kill you. But you ain't going to talk, is you? You ain't going to talk, is you? Right? Budweiser, right? You ain't going to talk. Be wise, bud. Be wise, bud. Budweiser, yeah. And so you see something that happened 15 years earlier, and you never know where the seeds are being planted. Now, I want to tell you a medrash, because we're going to come across this on Yom Kippur. We read on Yom Kippur, we read on Tisha B'Av about the 10 martyrs. And probably the most famous one is Rabbi Akiva, that Rabbi Akiva got raked. And the medrash says, when we read the dirge on Yom Kippur, the medrash says that the malachim, the angels, said to God, Zu Torah v'zu schara, this is the reward that Rabbi Akiva gets for Torah? This is the reward that Rabbi Akiva gets. He studied Torah and then he gets raked apart. Why are you raking him apart? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Shtok, be quiet. It's a decree. And if I hear another word, I'm going to put the world back to Tohu Vavo. I'm going to put the world back to before pre-creation. So the obvious question is, Stan, what kind of answer is that? It's like, ever have an argument with your father, and you say something with your father, says, one more word, you're going up. You're going, one more word, you're in your room. Which means he doesn't have a good answer for you. Right? You probably said something correct, and he doesn't have an answer for you. Now, one more word and you're out. One word, you're grounded. Right? Why? Because he doesn't have an answer. So the Malachim say, why are you doing this? One more word, I destroy the world. What, Kosh Baruch Hu doesn't have an answer for the Malachim? They have an answer for the Malachim? Why Kosh Baruch Hu could have given them an answer? Or he could have said, I don't feel like telling you. But why is it one more word and I'll put the world back into a state of tohu vavohu? So the Mepharshim say, imagine the following. There's a king, and the king buys this very, very expensive material. And there's a tailor. And the tailor is the world's most skilled tailor. And the king says to the tailor, I want you to make me a suit out of this most beautiful material. So the tailor takes the suit, and he makes this beautiful, beautiful outfit for the king. And the king wears the outfit, and he's just gaga over the outfit. He just loves this outfit. And all he does is talk about the outfit and the tailor. So the other ministers are jealous because this guy's getting a lot of prestige out of this. So they come to the king and say, True Excellency, it's a beautiful suit. But the tailor has embezzled some of the material. And embezzling the king's material is, death sentence. The tailor did a good job, but he took some of it. The king says, how do you know? So they say, well, let's measure the suit. So they measure up the suit. They can only account for 4.5 meters of material. and he bought 5 meters of material. So he calls in the tailor. He says, listen, I love the suit, but there's a very severe accusation against you. I've been told there's only 4.5 meters. Where is that other 0.5 meter of material? That's a death sentence. So the tailor says, give me the suit, Excellency. And he starts ripping out the stitching on the suit, starts destroying the suit. So the king says, you lost your mind? I mean, if you weren't in big enough trouble up until now, now you're ruining the suit. He says, I'm not ruining the suit, Excellency. You see, I'm a tailor. And what happens is, when I make a suit, I have to create hems for the suit. So I have to fold in some of the material and then stitch it. I didn't take any of the material. The material is folded up into the suit. The only problem is, there's no way for me to explain that to you because you're a layman. You don't know anything about stitching and sewing. So what I have to do is I have to put the suit into its original state. And once it's in its original state, then you can understand where the material went to. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to the Malachim that if one more word now put the world into a state of tohu vavohu, he didn't mean it as a threat. He meant if you really expect to understand everything that I've done and how I run the world, I would have to put the world into the original state, meaning you'd have to see everything since the time of creation in order to understand why this has led up to a point with all of the variations that have taken place, all of the variables, why it's led to a point that Rabbi Akiva needs to be raked. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu was saying to the Malachim. That means that ultimately it's impossible to understand anything in the world. If a person, sometimes we see cause and effect. You see, well, had I done that thing, because I did not do something I really wanted to do, something else worked out well. That happens in life. But ultimately, to understand it, you have to see, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running things since the time of creation, and he has a reason why everything is ending up the way it is. Okay. Take a look at Pasuk Zayin now. Torah says, it's on 1100. At the bottom of the page. Zechor Yemos Olam, remember the days of history. Binu Shnos Dor Vador. How does he translate Binu? Understand the years of generation after generation. She'al avicha v'yagedcha zekenecha v'yomrach. Ask your father and he will tell you. Your elders and they will explain it to you. So the basic idea here is that, you want to interpret we see like world events, right? So there are two ways to interpret world events. You can interpret world events according to the way the newspapers interpret them and the media interprets them. I'm not talking about nowadays where you can't trust the word the media says. Even back in the day where they did report what was going on. And you're trying to figure out world events, why is this happening? Why is that happening? Why is this the other thing happening? Well, it could be, and the Gemara says, whatever happens in the world, if there are calamities in the world, it's because of the Jewish people. So, you try to understand, why was there a World War II? We don't know, because we don't have prophets. But isn't it interesting that at the end of after an entire World War II, all of a sudden there's a resettling of the land of Israel? I'm not making any claims. I don't know, I'm not a prophet yet. Right, but so I'm not making any claim. I don't have Ruach HaKodesh, or at least that people know about. But at the end of the day, it's interesting. You're seeing a World War II, the ultimate calamity of the Jewish people. Yet, as a result, not that we would have asked for it, not that we're happy about, but as a result, all of a sudden now there's, for lack of better choice, give them the land of Israel. Let them go into the land of Israel. You understand? So we don't understand world events, and we don't know how to interpret. Who does know how to interpret them? The Gedol Yisrael. They can interpret things for us. Do you know what happened to the Mir Yeshiva? You're aware of the story, the Mir Yeshiva, that they went, you know what happened when they went to Shanghai? The Mir Yeshiva, the whole Yeshiva stayed together, where everybody else was getting decimated. They stayed together. They went through, somehow they got transit visas. Then they were put on a first-class Russian train across the entire Russian steps till they got to till they got to the port, and why did the Russians even build an airport, even build a railroad over there? Why did they build tracks over there? So the Mir Yeshiva could transfer. And where did they go? They went to Japan. They went to Kobe, Japan, and from Kobe, Japan, they then went to Shanghai, China. Now you got an entire yeshiva, 400 guys. And what happens? They get to Shanghai, China, and there is a massive shul that had stood empty for 15 years that was built by an Indian, a wealthy Indian Jew. And it stood empty 15 years. And when they get to Shanghai, where's the yeshiva going to go in Shanghai? And there's a massive building, bigger than what they ever had and dreamed about in Mir itself. And there they are. They got a base medrash is just waiting for them in Shanghai. So what happened 15 years earlier? All of a sudden, it's so the Mir Yeshiva could survive. And now you go to the Mir Yeshiva over here, the Mir Yeshiva over here, which is what do you call it? Which is it's 7,000 people. We don't understand how to interpret world events. Number one. Number two, what's the difference between? Look at the wording. Shalavicha v'yagedcha. Your father. What's the difference between v'yagedcha and v'yomru? Your father will vayagedcha. How does he translate? Your father will relate it to you. Your elders will tell you. What's the difference between vayagedcha and v'yomru? You remember what the difference is between? What does it say when the Torah was given? Kosomar lebeis Yaakov v'saged livnei Yisrael. Tomar to the women, Beis Yaakov. That's why the girls' schools are all called Beis Yaakov, the Beis Yaakov system. Kosomar, so you shall say to the women. V'saged livnei Yisrael. What's the difference between Tomar and Taged? Tomar is much softer. When you talk to the women, you got to talk soft. Because by the women, it doesn't matter what you say. It matters how you say it. Mayor. Doesn't matter what you say. It matters how you say it. Anybody who's been married for any great length of time, like about 12 minutes, right? So you will know that she doesn't care what you say. It doesn't matter what you say, it's how you say it. You could tell your wife that you won the lottery. You just won $7 million. And you come home, and she's about to tell you something about, I said, hey, just 1 second, I want to tell you, I won the lottery. I don't like your tone of voice. A lady, tone of voice, you could buy tone of voices. Now you can buy a ton of voices. I just won the lottery. It doesn't matter. I don't like your tone of voice. It doesn't matter what it is. V'saged, you got soft, gentle. You guys ask all the time, you guys have asked me, when you're married, how do you criticize your wife? What's the best way to criticize your wife? As my father used to say, punt, right? Punt, yeah. What do you do on fourth and 11? What do you do? You punt. That means you give it up. Don't. Just forget about it. How do you criticize your wife? You don't. That's the answer. Once in a while, you may be able to get away with a little bit of correction, but you've got to be careful. By the way, husbands are not that great at accepting criticism either. It's not just, men get very defensive. It's not like men are just, thank you for pointing out my flaws, right? When you talk to a woman as Somar, would talk to the Bnei Yisrael, v'saged livnei Yisrael. Let them know, hey guys, you mess up, you die. That's the only language men understand, right? You blow it, you die. Yeah, you can't talk that way to women. Here too, is there a difference how your father speaks to you and your grandfather speaks to you? Oh yeah. What's the difference there? What's the difference?
Grandfather's proud when you do something.
Yeah, and how does father talk to you? And father, he'll rake you across the coals if you need to be raked. Grandfather never rakes you. Grandfather never does that. Saged shalavicha, ask your father v'yagedcha. He'll tell you straight. He'll let you have it. Sometimes your father's got to let you have. Father has to train his kids. Zikeinecha v'yomer. The grandfather is much more gentle. The elder, the zakein v'yomer, they're much more gentle. They're much more, with the kids. My own grandchildren, even if I see them doing something wrong, easy, just give him another candy. Father has to be. I have a son-in-law. He's great. My son-in-law, when the kid is running around, he's a little out of control. He'll say to him, "I'm counting to 5. You better be over here. 1, 2. He's there." He's the father. The grandfather is okay. I got no leverage over him. It's not my job to discipline him. It's not my job to discipline. It's my job is to pamper him. Let the father discipline him. But they hear the grandfather because the grandfather, the certain sweetness that comes from the grandparents that you don't get from the father. The father's got to do his job, and somebody's got to discipline the kid. That falls to the father. Number one. Number two, it refers to the Zakanim, refers to the elders of the generation. She'al avicha v'yagedcha. We have the Haggadah Shel Pesach. What happens in the Haggadah Shel Pesach? You do a lot of talking, right? There's a lot of explaining, a lot of talking. Anytime you ask your father a question, if a son asks the father a question, what does the father? The father's thrilled that the son's asking him something. So what does the father do? V'yagedcha. He gives you a whole Megillah over. He gives you a whole explanation. He gives you the whole. When you ask one of the Gedolim a question, how do they answer? Very short, very brief to the point. If you ever get into the one, somebody once came to Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Zatzal. He said to him, if I take a pot off the fire, could I put it back on an open fire? If I take a pot off an open fire, could I put it back on? He said, yeah. This guy looked at him and said, on Shabbos? So Rav Shlomo Zalman said, oh, you mean on Shabbos? You didn't ask me that. You asked me, could I take a pot off a fire and put it back on? Yeah, that you could do. You didn't tell me it was on Shabbos. Now, he knew it was on Shabbos, but he wanted to teach the guy how to ask the question. But when you go to, if you ever had the schus to get into Reb Chaim Kanievsky, right? It was if he said two words, that means he was in a talkative mood that day, right? Shalavicha v'yagecha zekenecha. Rabbi Yashiv was once giving a shir. He used to give a regular Gemara shir. Rabbi Yashiv gave a very, very popular Gemara shir. So he once said something. So somebody said, yeah, but why? So everybody said, the Rashba. That was his answer. Why? Because the Rashba. He didn't elaborate on it. You asked me, I told you, it's the Rashba. You want to know, go look it up. Now you could go, I gave you an area, something to look up. Yeah, what were we going to ask, Miguel? Okay. That's okay. Take a look at Perek Lamed Beis Yud Aleph, Pasuk Yud Aleph. I have my own idea here. Oh, 1 second. I skipped one. Pasuk Yud. So here, let's just read. Start from Pasuk Tes. Ki chelak Hashem amo. Hashem's portion is His nation. That's us. We're the chosen people. Yaakov chevel nachalaso. Yaakov is the measure of His inheritance. That means Yaakov is His portion. Yimtza'eu be'eretz midbar. He discovered him in a desert land. I'm reading the ArtScroll translation directly. Uvisohu yilel yeshimon, in desolation. Okay, that was my word. A howling wilderness. Yet, even though the Jewish people were in this precarious desert situation, Yisovivenu, He surrounded them. Yivonenehu, He encircled them. He granted them discernment. Yitzrenu ki ishon eno. He protected him like the pupil of his eye. Now, Rashi says something over here which needs an explanation. Rashi, if you take a look, here's a description of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's relationship with the Jewish people. I'm going to tell you something phenomenal now. If you stay with this, we've spoken about this once before a long time ago. I'm going to tell you an unbelievable concept here. Remember we asked the question on Shavuos. It says that God held the mountain over the Jewish people like a barrel. Kofa aleim azar kigigis. Remember that? He held the mountain over them like a barrel. And the problem is that when you hold a mountain over a barrel, remember the example I gave you, the analogy? Imagine your brother comes running into the house. He's in a cold sweat. And what happened? He says, I was outside and I saw a poodle, but to me it was like a Doberman. He's terrified of dogs. I was walking outside, this poodle started barking at me, and to me it was like a Doberman. Do you understand why he needs the analogy? He wants you to understand how petrified he is of the poodle. I'm so petrified of the poodle that to me the poodle's like a Doberman. Imagine your brother comes running into the house and you say to him, what happened? I was outside, I saw a Doberman, and to me it was like a poodle. Doesn't make any sense. If I saw a Doberman, I would say I saw a Doberman, and to me it was very much like a Doberman. It's not like a poodle. That doesn't make any sense at all. So what does the Gemara say? God held the mountain over the Jewish people like a barrel. I don't understand. The Jewish people are looking up. This is a mountain right over our head. There's a mountain over here dangling over our head. Now, if you told me He held a barrel over their head, and to them it seemed like a mountain, I understand the analogy. You know how afraid I was of this barrel? To me, the barrel seemed like a mountain. But to tell me He held a mountain over their head, a mountain, oi! Well, mountain, big deal. Uh-oh, looks like a barrel. That does not make any sense. And remember, the Jewish people are the only people in history who have ever seen the underside of a mountain. They're underneath the mountains dangling over. I mean, if I was under a mountain, And I'll be like, hey, hold on to that thing, will you? Do you want to accept the Torah? Na'aseh v'nishma. I am so na'aseh v'nishma. I love na'aseh v'nishma. Just hold that mountain, will you? That's my reaction would be if I saw a mountain. A mountain, huh, big deal. A mountain. Oh, looks like a barrel. Doesn't make any sense. So now let's take a look at Rashi. Take a look at Rashi. You have to find it. It's on the right column of Rashi. And it just does not make any sense. If you take a look, it's about a little past the halfway point in the right column of Rashi. The first word in big block print is Yesovivenhu. He surrounded them. Do you see that? Take a look at it. Miguel, you see where that is? Everybody see it? If you find it, show the person next to you. So it says Yesovivenhu. He surrounded them. What does it mean he surrounded them? Says Rashi, Sham sibvam vehikifam ba'anonim. He surrounded them with the clouds of glory as protection. The clouds protected the Jewish people, deflected their various arrows and spears. V'sibvam b'digolim. He surrounded them la'arba ruchos. In other words, they were set in a military formation, 3 tribes on each direction, which was a form of protection. You're in a military formation. So it's also protection. And then he says, V'sibvam betachti sahar shekaf aleim kegigis. And he surrounded them under the mountain, which he held over like a barrel. I mean, yeah, well, 2 out of 3 ain't bad, but what's that got to do with protection? The first 2 are talking about surrounding the Jewish people. The mountain over them is a bear. He's dangling a mountain. What's that got to do with protection? You understand the question? You hear the problem? The answer is, what does it mean to hold a mountain over them like a barrel? If you take a barrel, if this is the barrel, and I turn it over, I can't because there's water in it right now. But if I would turn this over, let me have that cup for a second. Is that an empty cup? Here's the barrel. Here's the barrel. Okay, now, if I invert a barrel like this, and then I lower it on the people, what happens? You're inside the barrel. You're protected inside the barrel. The barrel is protecting you. Holding the mountain over the Jewish people like a barrel means he put the barrel over them. What does that mean? That means that he's telling us that when somebody looks from the outside at Torah, what do they see? Rules, regulations, restrictions, everything that you have to do. Comes along, the Gemara says, Hashem said, if you accept, he held the mountain over them like a barrel. The terminology of the Gemara in Shabbos is, he said to them, Im tekablena, if you accept the Torah, mutav, good. V'im lav, if not, sham take v'rasav, that's where you're going to be buried. Now the problem is that if you drop a mountain on somebody, I wouldn't call it sham take v'rasav. What would you call it?
Squash.
I would say po take v'rasav. Yeah, squash, po. Right? If you drop a mountain on somebody, is he sham or is he po, Yehuda? He's po. He's very, very po. Yeah, you don't get more po than that. You are very po. Right? So why does the Gemara say sham? That's where you'll be buried. The answer is that he was telling the Jewish people, I'm going to put you under a mountain over you like a barrel. And with all the laws, regulations, restrictions of the Torah, if you accept the Torah, mutav, that's the best thing you could do for yourself to live as a human being. You don't want the protective device of the Torah. Remember, you can't get out, but nothing can get in. You want to leave the protective device of Torah? You want to go out there? Sham take for us, and that world will bury you. That world with its vulgarity, its hefkerus, that world with no rules, that world with its backwardness, that world with its distortions, that world will bury you. And that's what it means over here. There were 3 things that surrounded them and protected them. They were surrounded by the clouds of glory. They're surrounded in a military formation, and they're surrounded by the mountain, meaning that mountain of Torah is what protects us. And for the Torah's teaching you over here, that's what protects you. Okay, so I will wish everybody a Gemar Chasima Tova and all the Torah Anytime people, anybody who honors us by listening to the Shir, you should all have a Gemar Chasima Tova, and everybody should have a good, easy fast. Try not to look at the clock. If you want Yom Kippur to pass, don't look at the clock. You know, sometimes people are sitting there, they have your machzor, and I see people in shul, they're going like this. They're glancing. Guys, first of all, where are you going? What was you're planning on doing on Yom Kippur? You know, you're not going harpooning off the coast of Nova Scotia. You know, so it's not like you're not going to eat lunch. I know exactly what the hurry is. And number one, number two, don't flip pages, guys, because you say the whole book on Yom Kippur. When you get to this over here, to this end, to this cover, then Yom Kippur is over. But you're saying the whole thing. So it doesn't do you any good to leaf at pages because you're going to be there a whole lot. Don't look at the clock. Try to focus on the more you focus on the davening, the more you focus on the Al Chetz. And by the way, when it comes to the Al Chetz, you know, there's no reason for it to echo across the shul. Right? It shouldn't be like a thump. You know, sometimes I hear people thumping Al Chetz. It's like I feel like somebody's trying to break a wall with a jackhammer. You know, it's it's just a, you know, Al Chetz, Al Chetz, Al Chetz, that sort of thing. You don't have to don't go pounding away, and try to, believe it or not, try to enjoy the day. Try to enjoy Yom Kippur, Ben Zion. That's right. Enjoy the fast, you know, because it's a day of cleansing. It's a day of cleansing. It's a day that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is cutting us some slack. That's ultimately what's happening. If a guy went to court to plead for his life, he wouldn't be thinking about food and eating and drinking. He'd be, hey, you have a chance to plead for your life. Go ahead and plead. So Yom Kippur is a day to enjoy, so everybody should have a Gemara Chassimat Tova.